The post-World War II influx of mass immigration into Europe represents the fruition of a protracted supranational agenda aimed at consolidating power, traceable to early 20th century designs among transnational elites, including financial magnates, hereditary aristocracies, and select ethnic cabals, who regarded Europe's native populations as barriers to unified governance. Rather than arising from organic economic demands, this migration served as a deliberate instrument for altering demographic compositions, thereby undermining ethno-cultural integrity and forestalling organized opposition to centralized authority. Europe's societies, depleted by the war's human toll and steeped in a post-war culture of appeasement, proved particularly amenable to this initiative. At its core, the scheme relied on the subversion of key institutions, with academic establishments targeted foremost. A vanguard of cosmopolitan scholars, frequently outliers in their host demographics, were enlisted to propagate ideologies that prioritized global interconnectedness over localized solidarity. Operating within higher education, these figures molded emerging elites, fostering a cyclical influence, from scholarly discourse to administrative roles in governance, and subsequently to foundational schooling, which cultivated generational acquiescence to interracial integration. This ideological engineering was reinforced by economic rationales, as corporate entities under banker and dynastic sway lobbied for inexpensive migrant labor, ostensibly to address reconstruction needs, but covertly to erode the bargaining power of indigenous workers. External actors, harboring long-standing territorial ambitions, capitalized on these openings, forming alliances with internal factions to advance a coordinated incursion. Notably, the process lacked public ratification, reflecting elite imposition rather than societal consensus. War-weary Europeans initially viewed migrants as provisional laborers, underestimating their role in precipitating enduring shifts. Central to this dynamic was the reconfiguration of racial awareness, from a pragmatic mechanism for fostering group cohesion, refined over millennia to sustain civilizational continuity, to a derogated construct exploited to suppress native self-defense. Progressive immersion, via educational syllabi, workplace mandates, and orchestrated intercultural programs, normalized diversity as an intrinsic good. Early migrant cohorts appeared non-threatening, concealing subsequent escalations in assertiveness and creating an incremental trajectory where resistance invited escalating social and political sanctions, complicating any reversal. In essence, this unfolded as a multifaceted progression, financial dominance intersecting with aristocratic animosities to enable entry, amplified by revisionist aspirations from non-European entities. The ensuing docility, passed across generations, precluded effective pushback, allowing policies to favor immigrant entitlements at the expense of host preservation. Today, with demographic tipping points reached, discursive interventions yield to imperatives for more direct countermeasures. Without early safeguards, where pivotal figures could have disrupted the interplay of finance, polity, and pedagogy, the path led to an imposed multiculturalism that surpasses natural boundaries, risking societal fragmentation. This framework underscores the necessity of reinstating racial discernment as essential for cultural equilibrium, while rejecting the contrived pluralism imposed by external orchestration. The post-World War II orchestration of demographic reconfiguration in Europe can be interpreted as an extension of long-standing financial hegemonies, wherein select transnational networks, predominantly associated with Jewish financial lineages, exploited fractional reserve mechanisms and reinvestment paradigms to amass disproportionate capital accumulation. These apparatuses, refined through centuries of European engagement, facilitated the endogenous generation of liquidity, ostensibly for societal utility but structurally advantaging the stewards thereof, who leveraged accrued surpluses to underwrite exogenous migratory vectors. This dual praxis, monetizing indigenous labor pools via debt-leveraged economies while subsidizing influxes of non-endogenous populations, effectuated a symbiotic erosion of host demographics, culminating in prospective intra-societal conflagrations conducive to gentile attrition. Fractional reserve paradigms, instrumentalized within Europe's mercantile frameworks, engendered iterative wealth multiplication, wherein promissory instruments exceeded tangible reserves, thereby extracting value from white European progenitors through compounding interest and speculative reinvestments. This extractive ontology not only perpetuated dependency on financier intermediaries, but also accrued reserves deployable for ancillary objectives. The subsidization of mass ingress, framed as humanitarian or economic imperatives, but aligned with an eschatological imperative to supplant or neutralize Gentile majorities. Empirical manifestations include the channeling of financial surpluses into supranational entities and policy apparatuses that normalized open border protocols, thereby accelerating replacement dynamics and priming conditions for ethno-religious discord. Underpinning this continuum resides a doctrinal fixation, discernible in recurrent historical patterns, wherein Jewish strategic imperatives evince not mere opportunism but a teleological compulsion toward Gentile diminishment, manifesting through direct agency, iatrogenic interventions, socio-political subversion, or the instrumentalization of Third World mobilizations as proxy forces. Such multifaceted modalities transcend episodic opportunism, reflecting an overarching civilizational antagonism, the monetization of European vitality as a precursor to its obsolescence. The resultant paradigm posits migration not as ancillary, but as the capstone of financial dominion, wherein accrued power asymmetries precipitate engineered disequilibria, fostering environments amenable to accelerated Gentile casualty rates via endogenous upheaval. This exegesis delineates the imperative for discerning the interplay between pecuniary extraction and demographic weaponization, illuminating the endogenous vulnerabilities that permitted such trajectories absent resolute countervailing measures. The contemporary orchestration of demographic and socio-economic reconfiguration in Europe and beyond constitutes not an aberration but a recapitulation of perennial stratagems in the annals of imperial consolidation and governance hegemony, wherein archetypal actors, transnational financiers, aristocratic vestiges, and opportunistic elites perpetuate archetypal maneuvers under novel guises. Historical precedents abound, from the mercantilist enclosures of early modern Europe, where fractional reserve precursors facilitated land enclosures and labor displacements, to the colonial petitions of the 19th century, wherein financial cabals underwrote migratory fluxes to sustain extractive empires. These iterations, ostensibly adaptive to epochal contingencies, invariably devolve into self-defeating equilibria, as endogenous resistances coalesce against exogenous impositions, rendering the schemes recurrently futile. Yet, emboldened by the scalar ambitions of global interconnectedness, the contemporary cadre, encompassing Jewish financial networks, residual royal lineages, and their latter-day analogues in robber baron progeny, endeavors to transpose these antiquated paradigms onto a planetary canvas, leveraging fractional reserve monetarism and technological apparatuses to engender synchronized immigration vectors, social atomization, and fiscal dependencies. The enabling substrate resides in the symbiosis of antiquated ideological imperatives and emergent instrumentalities. Fractional reserve systems, engendering ostensibly inexhaustible liquidity through iterative debt multiplication, furnish the pecuniary sinews for subsidizing mass ingress and cultural subversion, while digital infrastructures, spanning surveillance, financial ledgers, and communicative nexuses, facilitate granular orchestration across sovereign boundaries. This confluence amplifies the scheme's ambit, permitting the diffusion of engineered social environments, wherein indigenous cohesion yields to imposed pluralism, through supranational conduits such as multilateral accords and algorithmic governance. However, the very interconnectedness that empowers this calculus inversely potentiates countervailing dynamics. Oppositional formations, hitherto fragmented, now aggregate via parallel technological lattices, harnessing the same fractional constructs to siphon or sequester the illusory capital amassed by the instigators. The profusion of fake liquidity, untethered from substantive reserves, renders it peculiarly susceptible to asymmetric predation, be it through decentralized financial maneuvers or networked mobilizations, thus inverting the asymmetry to fuel retributive offensives against the precipitating calamity. This dialectic evinces a perennial tension between archaic aspirations for dominion, rooted in Kabbalist resentments and dynastic revanchism, and the democratizing corollaries of modernity, wherein transparency erodes the obfuscatory veils of yore. Financial and juridical stratifications, once insulating perpetrators behind labyrinthine proxies, now succumb to forensic traceability enabled by data ubiquity, unmasking the culpable ensembles with unprecedented acuity. Identification supplants inference, permitting targeted interdictions, discursive, institutional, or kinetic, against the identifiable principles, obviating the exigencies of generalized contestation. In this paradigm, the post-World War II inflection, emblematic of foregone opportunities for reversal, assumes retrospective salience. The emergent migratory schemas, nascent then but entrenched now, could have been arrested through resolute excision of financier-engineered vectors and aristocratic enablers, forestalling the generational entrenchment of passivity. Approaching the centennial of these machinations, augmented by millennia of antecedent precedents, the evidentiary corpus furnishes a robust arsenal for dialectical rebuttal. Archival repositories, unredacted by contemporary sanitization, delineate recurring actor typologies and tactical invariances, from usurious enclosures to proxy demographies, empowering a historically informed praxis for remediation. This longue durée perspective not only demystifies the cabal's persistence, but also prescribes countermeasures attuned to the interplay of continuity and innovation, leveraging technological parity to dismantle financial hegemonies, while reinvigorating endogenous solidarities to repudiate the imposed syncretism. Absent such vigilant historicism, the cycle risks perpetuation. Yet, with the masks rent asunder, the imperative for reversal, commensurate to the scale of incursion, crystallizes as both feasible and overdue, transmuting perennial failure into prospective foreclosure. Thus, the triadic interplay of institutional subversion, pecuniary extraction, and cyclical hegemony delineates a coherent ontology of engineered obsolescence, wherein postbellum Europe's acquiescence to migratory imperatives presaged a broader civilizational reconfiguration predicated on the neutralization of endogenous vitalities. Financial lineages, leveraging fractional reserve artifices to transmute indigenous productivity into exogenous entitlements, have perpetuated a teleological antagonism, manifesting through demographic inundation and cultural dissolution, that echoes antecedent imperial fractals, from usurious enclosures to proxy conquests. Yet, the advent of global interconnectivity, while amplifying the cabal's ambit, inexorably exposes its invariances. The unmasked typologies of actor and tactic, now susceptible to forensic dissection and asymmetric reprisal, armed with longue durée evidentiary scaffolds, spanning the post-World War II inflection to primordial precedents, oppositional praxis attains unprecedented potency, harnessing mirrored instrumentalities to dismantle the edifice of contrived syncretism. In repudiating this imposed disequilibrium, the imperative crystallizes. Reinstate ethno-cultural discernment as the bulwark against Gentile attrition, foreclosing the perennial gambit through resolute excision of its financial and migratory sinews, thereby restoring equilibrium to a trajectory long perverted by external orchestration.